This weekend, the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra takes the Centennial Concert Hall stage in their last Classics concert series, conducted by Maestro Alexander Micklethwaite. Farewell, Alexander features symphonic masterworks of old, namely Richard Strauss' Ein Heldenleben, as well as the music of a new voice on the Canadian music scene, Iman Habibi. Ahead of this weekend's performance, I'm joined by composer Iman Habibi in the Diamond Lane. Welcome to Classic 107.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's truly a pleasure to have you here. I know it's quite the process to get here. I know traffic was a little bit tough, and you're running here, so appreciate your coming in this afternoon.
My pleasure.
So I want to begin with a question that I'm always interested in asking people who write music. When did you start composing?
Right. So I started playing piano first, but my kind of entry into playing piano was through making things up at the keyboard. So we had a keyboard in our house from the time I was 5 years old. But learning music is not really part of the Iranian culture. It's not really something that's expected, that parents would put their children through music lessons. So it didn't really occur to my family to put me for music lessons up until I was 11 or 12 years old. And that's because they saw me playing so much on the keyboard by myself and trying to figure out things that I heard and trying to play back to things that I would hear. And so they saw that I was interested. And so they were asking around, and they found me a piano teacher. And my piano teacher happened to be a composer himself. But he wasn't the one who introduced me to composition. I started making things up. So after I played certain pieces, I figured out, oh, there's a left-hand pattern that I can keep repeating, and then I can make up things in my right hand. So I think I wrote my first piece when I was about 13 years old.
Wow.
And I didn't have staff paper. So
Yeah.
I made my own staff paper with a ruler, and I notated it myself. I still have that notation. It looks absolutely pathetic. But I showed it to my piano teacher, who was also a composer, and he said, well, everybody has to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
And that was kind of discouraging for me. And I also felt that because I was studying piano, but I didn't have a knowledge of music theory and harmony and all those things, that I wasn't really ready to start composing. So I stopped composing for a long period of time, basically until I came to Canada when I was 17 years old. And that's when I went to college and started studying piano, and then I met all these people who were playing trumpet and all these other different instruments, and they were also composing, and they had this composer collective. So I started making things up on the piano, and I would just memorize them. I didn't really know how to notate them. I knew how the notation worked, but I didn't have the experience to sit down and write it and figure out the rhythms. So I would memorize and play the whole concert from memory. So I wrote a lot of pieces like that.
Yeah.
And then later on, I notated those. And then when I went to University of British Columbia, I started taking composition classes. So that's when it officially started.
It's a really remarkable story, though. Like, I mean, to really be that self-motivated and just to have this music inside you that you need to get out somehow is really a great thing. And to me, also, what I hear in that is that it sounds very playful. You know, to be able to sit there and have this music and have it come out, and then even not have it notated properly, but to get it out there, that is an element of play that, you know, sometimes when people think of composition, they maybe think of it as more rigid or structured, but it sounds so natural. Like, you make it sound so approachable that way.
I like to think of it that way, yeah, that there's really no structure to composition. If there's a structure, if you're going by a structure, you're probably thinking of something that somebody else has already done. You're basing your work on a form that's already established or a harmonic language that's already established. So if you're really trying to break new ground and explore new paths, then you're making it up as you go, and you're figuring out new ways to write music as you write music.
Oh, wow. So fast forward a little bit. As you mentioned, you went to UBC, you've completed doctoral studies at the University of Michigan, now calling New York home, right?
Yes, temporarily, yes.
And your music's been performed around the world, of course, New York, but London, Paris, Toronto, Oslo, Tehran, and perhaps grandest on the list, Winnipeg, which people are now discovering with the success of the Jets in the playoffs, it seems. What I'm curious about as well is that in the 21st century, I mean, there's so many different ways of making music, technology being what it is. What draws you to the symphony?
Oh, I just... I love the coloristic possibilities. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
All the different things that you can do with an orchestra, and just the richness of acoustic sounds, as opposed to electronic ones. There's just something so human about that, and also there's something so human about performing arts and the very act of performing, and sitting in a hall knowing that the performer there is really struggling to play those notes that you've written for them. There's a real struggle that you're witnessing there, and that any second something might go wrong, right?
Yeah, the stakes are high.
There's something exciting about that, and it's not necessarily a fault or a shortcoming if something goes wrong. It's just part of the performance, and that's something that makes it so human and exciting for me, I think.
So this weekend there's a big performance happening. The WSO is going to be performing your work, The Promised Hand. What can you tell us about it?
Oh, so I wrote this piece for the Vancouver Philharmonic Orchestra when I was their composer in residence in the 2014-2015 season. So there's a play on words in the title with The Promised Land, of course. And this was written shortly after the Israel-Gaza 2014 conflict. And it was also written shortly after my wedding. So I got married in September 2014. So those were two events that, because my music is, I consider myself an activist, and my music is often motivated by things that are happening in the society. So those were two things that really were on my mind as I wrote this piece, and I think they kind of came together. And in the Israel-Gaza conflict, I see this constant tension between people that belong to two different religions, and they just can't find the commonalities between them. And me being of a Muslim background and my wife being of a Christian background, and I find that our marriage is kind of the opposite of that, that we have found the common ground. And so in bringing two things together is where I found the commonality between those two topics. And I think in this piece you will hear, apart from the feelings that I went through on my wedding day, and kind of the rush and the elation and the kind of peace that you feel, apart from that, you also hear these two lines that are constantly overlapping with each other, and towards the end of the piece you will hear them in the two flutes overlapping, and then it ends with the string harmonics playing that line and kind of all coming together, the two lines that are overlapping coming together into one.
A unification.
That's right.
Oh, that's very beautiful. I mean, Maestro Alexander Micklethwaite was here with me in the Diamond Lane a couple of days ago, and he was very complimentary of your music, and he said it made for a great opener in the show. I'm curious, looking at the rest of the program with Shostakovich and Strauss on the program, how do you feel it complements or works with those two composers?
Right, so that's something probably for Alexander to talk about since he's programmed them together. So I clearly wrote this piece with a different program in mind, but I think there's that idea of unity. There's definitely exists in all those pieces, and also with Strauss's piece, there's also the political connotations which also exist in mind. They're kind of an undertone, but in both pieces.
And the Shostakovich as well, I think. I mean,
yes.
Being the activist that he was in a different sort of fashion. And that's immediately what I was struck by as well, is, in listening to you explain The Promised Hand, and then in speaking to him about Ein Heldenleben and the Violin Concerto No. 1, they all really flow so beautifully in a sort of way that gives us this wonderful scope of music and connection. Yeah. You also mentioned the connection in A Promised Hand to your wife. I mean, not just your partner in life, but also your musical partner. And I understand she's going to be doing a little bit of performing here in town as well.
Yes. So she's a terrific pianist, and she's presenting a concert on May 13th, Sunday, at Fort Garry United Church at 4 p.m. So that will also include one of my pieces. It's a piano sonata, also called Voyage. It's a piece that I wrote for the Museum of Anthropology. It was commissioned by them. The Museum of Anthropology is in Vancouver. And they had an exhibition called Safar, which also means voyage. And this piece was commissioned for the opening of that exhibition. So I played that myself there. So in kind of finding my own story through the idea of voyage, in a way, the piece is about the process of immigration for me, and how my life and my musical life transformed through the process of immigration, and the music that I heard as a child versus the music the music tradition that I'm trained in, which is Western classical music, and how those two things come together.
Oh, it really does sound great. Iman Habibi, thanks for being here in the Diamond Lane.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're just happy to have you and to hear about your journey, one that obviously motivates your music and continues. So looking forward to hearing more in the future.
Thank you so much.
I've been chatting with Iman Habibi. He is in Winnipeg to have his work, The Promised Hand, open the WSO's final Classics Concert Series performance, Farewell Alexander. The program, as you might have caught, also features the music of Dmitri Shostakovich, the Violin Concerto No. 1, performed by Bonsori Kim, and Richard Strauss' Ein Heldenleben, A Hero's Life. 2 chances to see the show, tonight, 8 p.m., tomorrow at the same time. The last concert's conducted by Maestro Alexander Micklethwaite in the home of the WSO. For more information and tickets, visit wso.ca.